Right now, under 5 kilometers of ice, there's a lake bigger than some small countries. It has been sealed shut for millions of years. No sunlight has ever touched it. No human eye has ever seen it. And that is not even the strangest part. Down there in the dark, there are creatures alive today that have never once felt the sun on their skin. There are mountains taller than skyscrapers that no map ever shows you. There's even a plane that crashed decades ago and is still down there somewhere, swallowed whole by snow and ice. But here's the part that should really grab you. Some of the most powerful countries on Earth are quietly racing to get control of this place, not because it looks nice in photos, because what is hiding under that ice could be worth more than every gold mine on the planet combined. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what they are chasing, and you will understand why a deadline sitting way out in the year 2048 has some world leaders in a hurry, moving pieces into place right now, years before that date even arrives. Here is the wild part. Almost nothing you are about to hear needed a submarine or a drill to find. Most of it was discovered by planes flying overhead with sensors that can basically see straight through solid ice, the same way a doctor can see straight through your skin. An entire hidden world, mapped without anyone actually touching it. Let's start at the surface and work our way down, layer by layer, until we hit the real reason everyone wants a piece of this frozen continent. A continent that's hiding something. Most people picture Antarctica as one giant, boring block of ice sitting at the bottom of the world. White, flat, empty, nothing going on. That picture is completely wrong. Antarctica is actually bigger than the United States and Mexico put together. Just to cross it from one side to the other would take you longer than driving across most countries on Earth. It is also the coldest place on the planet, the driest place on the planet, and the windiest place on the planet. All 3 records held by the exact same spot. Temperatures out there can drop to almost 90 degrees below zero. At that kind of cold, exposed skin can freeze in minutes and metal becomes so brittle it can crack like glass. Winds have been clocked at over 200 miles an hour, faster than the strongest hurricanes ever recorded anywhere else on Earth. Strong enough to flip a car if a car could even survive being parked out there. For months at a time in winter, parts of the continent never see the sun rise at all. Just darkness day after day, week after week, with nothing but wind and ice for company. And under all of that brutal weather sits an amount of frozen water that is genuinely hard to picture in your head. Antarctica holds about 70% of every drop of fresh water on planet Earth. Not 70% of the water in one country. 70% of the fresh water on the entire planet, locked up solid in one place. In some spots, the ice is so thick that if you stacked 10 Eiffel Towers on top of each other, you still would not see daylight at the bottom of it. A small number of scientists live out there year-round, tucked inside research stations that look more like something from a space movie than a normal building. They deal with months of darkness, brutal cold, and total isolation from the rest of the world, all so they can study a place most of us will never set foot on. To really understand how much frozen water we are talking about, think of it this way. If every bit of ice covering Antarctica somehow melted at once, oceans around the entire world would rise by well over 100 feet. Coastal cities on every continent would disappear underwater completely. That is the kind of power sitting frozen at the bottom of our planet, quietly doing nothing most days, just sitting there, waiting. To put the isolation of this place into perspective, more people climbed to the top of Mount Everest in a single year than ever set foot on large parts of inland Antarctica across an entire decade. It is easier for most humans to reach the top of the tallest mountain on Earth than it is to reach the middle of this frozen continent. That should tell you something about how untouched this place really is, and how little of it has ever actually been explored up close. Here's the part that should really stop you in your tracks, though. Even in a place this harsh, with wind that can knock a grown adult flat on their back and cold that can freeze skin in minutes, there is life. And we are not just talking about penguins waddling around on top of the snow. We are talking about creatures living far below the surface, in complete darkness, sealed off from the sun and the rest of the world for thousands of years at a time. So if this place is really this extreme, and life is somehow surviving in some of the worst conditions found anywhere on the planet, what else could be hidden under all that ice? That question is exactly what we are about to answer, one layer at a time. And keep in mind, everything you are about to see is happening on a continent that technically does not belong to anyone. No country owns Antarctica. No flag officially claims it. For over 60 years, that has actually kept it safe. But as you're about to find out, safe does not always mean forgotten, and it definitely does not mean nobody wants it. Before we go any further, if that fact about a hidden lake the size of a small country already has you hooked, do us a favor and hit like and subscribe right now. This channel takes strange, hidden corners of our planet, the parts most people never even think to ask about, and breaks them down piece by piece so they actually make sense. Once you see what is really living, moving, and buried under Antarctica's ice, you are going to want to be here for whatever we dig up next. Now let's start heading down, starting with the ice itself, because the ice is not just frozen water. It is basically a diary. The ice that remembers. Picture snow falling in Antarctica year after year, for hundreds of thousands of years in a row, without ever fully stopping. Each year, a fresh layer falls right on top of the last one. Slowly, that snow gets squeezed down by the sheer weight of everything piling up above it. Layer after layer packs together tighter and tighter, until eventually it turns into solid, dense ice. Here's the part that makes this so useful to scientists. As that snow gets crushed down into ice, tiny bubbles of air get trapped inside it, sealed shut. That air is a tiny sample from that exact year, frozen in place like a message stuffed inside a bottle. And because these layers keep stacking up one after another, almost exactly like the rings inside a tree trunk, scientists can drill straight down through them and read the story of our planet's air, 1 year at a time, going back further than almost anything else on Earth can show us. These long frozen tubes that scientists pull out of the ground are called ice cores. Drilling one out is not quick or easy. It can take teams of scientists years of careful freezing work, slowly pulling up narrow cylinders of ice from deep underground, sometimes drilling down nearly 2 miles before they finally stop. And the oldest ice core ever recovered holds air that is roughly 1,200,000 years old. Air that was floating around in our sky long before modern humans ever existed on this planet. Air from a time when Earth looked like a completely different world than the one we live in today. That trapped ancient air tells scientists exactly when the Sahara Desert used to be green and covered in grass and plants instead of sand. It tells them what the air was like when massive, hairy elephants called mammoths were still wandering around. It even proves that at one point in Earth's past, the level of a gas, called carbon dioxide, in our air was only half of what it is right now. The ice remembers every bit of it, perfectly preserved, like a diary that nobody has managed to fully read yet. But here's the part that keeps scientists up at night. If that ice ever melts away, all of that hidden history disappears with it permanently. There is no backup copy sitting somewhere else. It would be like watching the only surviving copy of a book that explains our planet's entire weather history burned to ashes, one page at a time, with no way to ever get it back. This is not just a fun fact for scientists to admire either. By comparing what the air looked like thousands of years ago with what our air looks like right now, researchers can figure out exactly how fast things are changing today, and how unusual today's changes really are compared to anything Earth has gone through naturally in the past. Without this frozen record, we would basically be guessing. With it, scientists have hard proof going back over 1 million years. Getting these ice cores is brutal work. The coldest temperature ever recorded anywhere on Earth was measured near the middle of Antarctica. Cold enough to freeze your breath solid before it even leaves your mouth. Scientists drilling in conditions like that have to work in short shifts, wrapped in layers of gear, because staying outside too long at those temperatures can genuinely be deadly. Every single ice core pulled up from that kind of cold represents weeks or even months of careful, dangerous work, just to bring up a few feet of frozen history at a time. Before we move even deeper, here's one more strange story hiding near the surface, and this one has nothing to do with nature at all. Back in 1979, a passenger plane full of tourists crashed straight into the side of that very same volcano, and all 257 people on board were lost. The ground out there is so unstable and constantly shifting that a full recovery of the wreckage was never even possible. Snow buried most of the crash site within just days of it happening. To this day, pieces of that plane are almost certainly still frozen somewhere under the ice, held perfectly in place by the cold, exactly the way they landed all those years ago. That is the strange truth about this entire place. The cold out there does not just freeze things solid and leave them alone. It holds on to them. It locks secrets away and almost never lets them go. And we have only made it through the very top layer so far. To understand what is really going on underneath all of this ice, we need to keep heading down, past the frozen surface, into something most people do not even know exists. Rivers no one has ever seen. Scientists have found nearly 700 of these hidden lakes scattered underneath the ice so far, and there are almost certainly more still waiting to be found. One of the largest is called Lake Vostok, and it is genuinely massive, stretching longer than most countries, and buried under more than 2 miles of solid ice. It has been completely sealed away from our air and our sunlight for millions of years, possibly even longer than humans have existed as a species. Reaching Lake Vostok took Russian scientists decades of slow, careful drilling. They had to be extremely careful the entire way down, because punching straight through into a lake that has been sealed shut for millions of years risks contaminating it instantly with modern bacteria carried down on the drill itself. When they finally broke through, the water rushed up the borehole and refroze almost immediately, giving scientists a frozen sample of water that had not touched open air since long before humans existed. In another one of these lakes, called Lake Whillans, scientists have found tiny living things that somehow survive by pulling energy straight out of the surrounding rock, without ever needing sunlight at all. In yet another lake called Lake Mercer, researchers pulled up samples from the lake bed and found clear signs that life has been living and dying down there for a very long time. For almost a century, That red stain sat there completely unexplained, one of the strangest sights anyone had ever photographed in Antarctica. Every new team of explorers who spotted it came up with their own guess, and none of the guesses quite fit. It took modern equipment, decades later, to finally figure out what was really going on underneath that ice. Here is the real answer, and it is honestly cooler than anything they could have guessed back then. That deep red liquid is ancient, extremely salty water that has been trapped and sealed underneath almost a quarter mile of solid ice for millions of years straight. It is more than twice as salty as normal ocean water, which is exactly why it is able to keep flowing as a liquid even in freezing temperatures that would lock anything else in place. The water is also packed full of dissolved iron. And the moment that iron touches open air at the surface, it rusts almost instantly, the exact same way an old nail left out in the rain slowly turns bright orange. That rusting reaction is what paints the ice such a shocking blood-red color. Blood falls is not some strange, one-time accident either. Scientists believe there could be thousands of these hidden water outflows scattered underneath Antarctica, quietly carrying iron and nutrients from deep inside the ice all the way out toward the surrounding ocean. Most of them never actually reach the surface the dramatic way blood falls does. They just quietly feed the ocean from below, completely out of sight, doing their work in total silence. And that hidden nutrient boost matters way more than most people would ever guess. When that nutrient-rich meltwater finally reaches the open ocean, it feeds tiny floating plants near the surface. Those tiny plants feed swarms of small, shrimp-like creatures called krill, and that krill feeds massive animals higher up the food chain, all the way up to blue whales, the single largest animals to have ever existed on our planet, bigger than even the largest dinosaurs that ever walked the earth. We nearly wiped every single one of them out completely. Between the years 1904 and 1967, over 360,000 whales were killed in the waters surrounding Antarctica alone. Blue whale numbers crashed by 97% during that stretch of time, dropping from massive populations down to just a scattered few. They are slowly recovering today, decades later, but only because that hidden chain we just walked through, starting with rivers we cannot even see under the ice, is still quietly doing its job every single day, feeding the entire ocean from below without anyone noticing. And remember those tiny, shrimp-like creatures we mentioned right at the very beginning of this video, alive in total darkness, cut off from sunlight for thousands of years straight? Scientists actually found animals just like that, living hundreds of miles away from any daylight at all, deep underneath the ice, swimming around calmly in water that has genuinely never once seen the sun. If life can survive down there, crushed under miles of ice, completely cut off from sunlight and the outside world, that raises a much bigger question. And what else could survive in conditions like that, somewhere else entirely in our solar system? Scientists studying icy moons like Europa and Enceladus, which are also believed to have oceans sealed beneath frozen shells, use places like this as their closest comparison here on Earth. We are not saying Antarctica is hiding aliens, but it is quietly showing us exactly what alien life somewhere else might actually look like, and how it might survive. Think about it this way. Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, is covered in a shell of solid ice with what scientists believe is a giant liquid ocean underneath it, completely cut off from sunlight, just like the lakes buried under Antarctica. If tiny creatures can survive crushed under miles of Antarctic ice with no sunlight at all, then a moon millions of miles away with the exact same setup suddenly does not sound so impossible anymore. Antarctica is basically giving scientists a practice run for what they might eventually find out there. We will come back to that thought later. But first, we need to go even deeper, past all this hidden water, all the way down to the solid ground itself, the land buried alive. You are now getting close to the very bottom, where the ice finally meets solid rock. And here is the twist that almost nobody expects. That rock underneath is not just a flat, boring floor sitting quietly under all that ice. It is an entire hidden continent, one that almost nobody alive today has ever actually seen with their own eyes. Scattered underneath West Antarctica, buried under thousands of feet of solid ice, are dozens of volcanoes. Some of them are still active right now, at this very moment. Because the ice sitting on top of them is so incredibly heavy, these volcanoes cannot explode upward the normal way a volcano usually does at the surface. Instead, all of that built-up heat gets trapped below, quietly melting the ice from underneath and slowly carving out hidden pockets of water and steam far beneath the surface. Scientists have actually found thin layers of volcanic ash buried deep inside ice cores, solid proof that these volcanoes were erupting while that very ice was still forming, thousands of years ago. This means the ice is not only melting because warmer air is hitting it from above. In some places, it is also quietly being cooked from underneath at the exact same time. But these hidden volcanoes are really just a small piece of a much bigger picture. Using millions of careful measurements collected over many decades, scientists have finally been able to build a detailed map that basically strips away every single inch of ice, showing exactly what the land underneath truly looks like without any of the frozen cover hiding it. And what shows up on that map is honestly stunning. There are entire mountain ranges buried down there, called the Gamburtsev Mountains, every bit as tall and rugged as the Alps in Europe, and almost nobody has ever laid eyes on them because they have been completely buried under ice for millions of years straight. These mountains actually confuse scientists because normally jagged peaks like these form on young, active ground, not on some of the oldest, most stable rock on the planet. Nobody has fully agreed yet on exactly how they got there, sitting frozen and hidden, looking almost brand new despite being ancient. There's also a canyon carved deep into that hidden rock that plunges more than 2 miles below sea level, making it one of the deepest canyons found anywhere on land across the entire planet, even deeper than the Grand Canyon by a wide margin. If you could somehow drain every drop of ice out of that canyon and stand at the bottom of it, you would be standing lower than almost anywhere else on dry land on Earth, with walls of rock rising up around you higher than most mountains. Old, dried-up river valleys wind quietly between these buried mountains too, frozen in place exactly the way they looked long before any ice ever showed up to cover them. Here's something else that Hidden Map reveals, and it might be the most surprising part of this entire section. Antarctica is not actually one single uniform continent underneath all that ice. It is really 2 very different pieces stitched together into one. The eastern half is old, thick, and extremely stable, considered one of the oldest and most solid pieces of ground found anywhere on the entire planet. The western half tells a completely different story altogether. Millions of years ago, powerful forces deep inside the Earth slowly pulled that section of land apart, stretching it thin, cracking it in places, and causing large sections of it to sink lower over time. That stretching and cracking is part of the reason West Antarctica has so many hidden volcanoes today. All of that ancient stretching brought heat much closer to the surface than it normally would be. When ice eventually started piling up on top of this uneven land, it filled in those low, cracked areas first, burying the lowest points before anywhere else. If you could strip away every bit of ice covering West Antarctica today, huge sections of it would actually sit below sea level, broken apart into a scattered mix of small islands and higher patches of ground poking up here and there like the tops of buried hills. And here's where it gets almost impossible to believe. Scientists have found fossilized pollen and old preserved root systems buried deep in that hidden rock, solid proof that this frozen, lifeless-looking place used to be completely green. Forests, flowing rivers, a mild, comfortable climate that would feel nothing like what we picture today. Antarctica was once warm and covered in plant life, back when it was still connected to other continents as part of one giant landmass, long before it slowly drifted down to the bottom of the world and eventually froze solid. Scientists have even pulled dinosaur bones out of exposed rock at the edges of the continent, proof that these creatures once walked across land that is now buried under permanent ice. Back then, Antarctica sat much closer to the equator, connected to South America, Africa, India, and Australia as one single supercontinent. Slowly, over tens of millions of years, that supercontinent tore itself apart, and Antarctica drifted south all on its own, spinning into place at the bottom of the globe and gradually freezing over as it went, burying its warm past under layer after layer of snow. There's one more mystery buried down there that scientists still cannot fully explain, even with all our modern technology. Hidden underneath the eastern side of the continent is a massive, almost perfectly circular shape, carved right into the rock, roughly the size of a small country. Nobody is completely sure what caused it. Some scientists believe it could be a scar left behind by a massive impact millions of years ago, something enormous crashing into Earth and leaving this shape behind. Others are not convinced that is the answer at all. Whatever it actually turns out to be, it is enormous, and it has been sitting there hidden this entire time, completely out of sight. Even the weight of all this ice has slowly reshaped the land underneath it. For millions of years, the sheer weight pressing down has pushed the rock further into the Earth, almost like pressing your hand down into a soft mattress. If large sections of that ice ever melt away, the land underneath does not just stay put. Very slowly, over centuries, it actually rises back up again, almost like a sponge slowly puffing back out after you finally let go of it. This slow rising and sinking can even change coastlines, shift how water drains across the continent, and put new stress on the rock deep underground, all happening at a pace far too slow for a human to ever notice with the naked eye, but fast enough for scientists to measure with modern equipment. So under all of that ice sits a lost, forgotten world. Buried mountains taller than most people could imagine, a canyon deeper than anything found on the surface anywhere else, solid proof of ancient forests that once thrived down there, an unexplained scar roughly the size of a small nation, all of it hidden, all of it silent, all of it just waiting there in the dark. And that silent, hidden world you just heard about is exactly what is about to become one of the biggest prizes on the entire planet. The race nobody's talking about. Here's the question we have been building toward this entire video. If Antarctica is packed with buried mountains, ancient forests, hidden rivers, and mysteries scientists still cannot fully explain, why exactly are powerful countries racing to plant flags and build bases there right now, today, in this exact moment? The answer comes down to one simple word: resources. Antarctica actually shares the same deep layers of rock as South America, Africa, India, and Australia. And every single one of those continents happens to be loaded with coal, oil, valuable metals, and rare materials that modern technology completely depends on. Think about the metals packed inside your own phone right now, or the materials used to build electric car batteries and wind turbines. Many of those same rare materials are believed to sit inside rock, just like the rock buried under Antarctica. Based on that shared geology, scientists believe Antarctica could be sitting on resources worth trillions of dollars, all buried and waiting quietly under the ice, untouched. To put that number in perspective, a resource pool worth trillions of dollars is more than the entire yearly economy of most countries on Earth combined. It is the kind of number that makes governments think in terms of decades, not years, and start planning today for a payoff that might not arrive until long after current leaders are gone. For now, none of it can legally be touched at all. Back in 1959, most of the world's major countries signed an agreement called the Antarctic Treaty. This agreement officially declared Antarctica a place meant only for peace and scientific research, nothing else. It banned any military activity there completely, and it froze every single country's territorial claims in place, meaning no nation is currently allowed to claim ownership over any part of the land, no matter how much they might want to. But there is a catch, and it is the whole reason we started this video talking about the year 2048 in the first place. That treaty includes a specific rule stating that in 2048, the current ban on mining can officially be reviewed by the countries involved. That review does not automatically mean mining will suddenly be allowed everywhere across the continent. But it does crack the door open, and once that door is even slightly open, some countries clearly intend to be first in line, ready to walk right through it. That date was not picked at random either. Back in 1991, when the mining ban was written into the treaty, negotiators agreed on a 50-year window before anyone could even bring up changing it. 50 years felt safely far away at the time, almost impossible to plan around. But now, decades later, the once distant deadline is finally close enough to actually prepare for. And that is exactly what is happening behind the scenes right now, quietly, station by station, survey by survey. And some of them are already positioning themselves right now, years before that date has even arrived. Russia has been quietly running detailed underground surveys across Antarctic waters, carefully mapping out exactly where oil and gas deposits might be hiding beneath the seafloor. China has been rapidly expanding its presence across the continent, building brand new stations designed to stay open and fully staffed all year round, and pouring serious money into research, mapping projects, and long-term logistics that will pay off decades from now. Meanwhile, the United States' Antarctic program has been quietly dealing with aging buildings, uncertain funding, and shifting priorities, pulling attention elsewhere. Other countries are watching closely too. Nations like Australia, Chile, Argentina, and the United Kingdom have all held long-standing interests in research bases in Antarctica for decades, some going back long before the treaty was even signed. As the year 2048 slowly creeps closer, every single one of these countries has strong reasons to want a stronger foothold on the ice before anything actually changes. Mining is not even the only pressure building around this place. Tourist ships now carry more visitors down to Antarctica every single year than ever before, and fishing fleets have been pushing further into the surrounding waters, chasing krill, the same tiny creatures that the entire ocean food chain depends on. More ships, more bases, and more people all mean more pressure on a place that spent most of history completely untouched by humans. Every single one of these pieces adds up, slowly chipping away at how isolated this continent really is. Slowly, quietly, almost without most people noticing, the balance of power on this frozen continent is shifting. And remember everything we just walked through together across this entire video. The hidden rivers running silently beneath the ice, the lakes that have never once seen a single ray of sunlight, the creatures living down there in total darkness for thousands of years. The trail of nutrients flowing from deep underground all the way out to the open ocean, feeding the very same whales we almost hunted into complete extinction less than a century ago. All of it exists in a fragile, delicate balance that took millions of years to slowly build up. And all of it happens to be sitting directly on top of resources some of the most powerful nations on Earth clearly, desperately want. The year 2048 might sound impossibly far away when you first hear it, but really, it is only about 2 decades from right now, which will pass by faster than most people expect. That might still feel like a long stretch of time to you and me, But for something that took millions of years to slowly form, layer by layer, 2 decades is barely anything at all. It is basically a single blink. Under 5 kilometers of ice sits a complete record of our planet's entire atmospheric history, going back over a million years. Hidden rivers move quietly through total darkness every single day. Life survives down there without a single ray of sunlight ever reaching it. Entire mountain ranges sit buried and completely forgotten beneath the surface. And underneath all of it, ancient rock still silently remembers a version of this place that was green, warm, and completely unrecognizable compared to what we see today. Antarctica is not some empty, frozen leftover space sitting at the bottom of a map. It is a fully connected system, working all the way from the buried rock at the bottom, up through the ice in the middle, out to the open ocean at the very top. Heat quietly shapes the land beneath it. Ice controls exactly where the water goes. That water carries nutrients out toward the sea. Those nutrients keep entire food chains alive and thriving. Change even one single piece of that chain, and the effects ripple outward through every other piece connected to it, whether we notice right away or not. Systems like this take millions of years to carefully build. They can be disrupted in a tiny fraction of that time, sometimes without anyone even realizing it is happening until it is already too late. For more than 60 years now, this fragile hidden world has managed to stay protected from serious harm. In 2048, that protection can officially be put back on the table for discussion. And as new technology keeps making once completely impossible to reach places suddenly reachable, some of the most powerful nations on the entire planet are already quietly getting themselves into position, well ahead of time. Sometimes the most important thing you can possibly do for a place like this is simply leave it alone. Antarctica might be exactly that kind of place. Think back to everything hiding down there. Air from over 1 million years ago, still sealed shut inside the ice. Rivers and lakes that have never once seen daylight. Living creatures surviving in total darkness. Buried mountains, a hidden canyon, and proof of forests that grew there long before ice ever showed up. All of it sitting quietly under a place most people picture as nothing but an empty white blank spot on the map. The truth is the exact opposite. Antarctica might be one of the most complicated, most alive, most valuable places on the entire planet, and most of us never think about it at all. If this completely blew your mind, even just a little bit, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what we dig up next. We cover strange, hidden corners of our planet, just like this one all the time. And trust us, this will not be the last frozen mystery we crack wide open. Before you go, here's a question for you to think about. If scientists somehow found solid proof of life living miles underneath Antarctica's ice, completely cut off from sunlight and the entire outside world, do you think that would change how we think about the chances of life existing on other planets? Drop your honest answer down in the comments below. And if you want to see what other hidden places on Earth are currently under this exact same kind of pressure, check out the video appearing on your screen right now.